Hi, everyone. For those of you just joining in, we will be getting started in about just 1 minute. So if you don't mind just sitting tight, we appreciate your patience. Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started. The time is now 6:01. So to be mindful and respectful of everyone's time, we will go ahead and get started. For those of you just joining in, hi everyone. My name is Jessica Yazdani, and I am one of the 4 college and career counselors with Futureology. We work for Capistrano Unified School District, and each of us serves 1 to 2 high schools. So I'm stationed at San Juan Hills High School, and then I'll let my colleague introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Rangifo. I am one of the Futurology counselors, and I am located at Dana Hills High School and Tesoro. I'm split between both sites. Welcome, and thanks for joining us tonight.
And then we have Erica Espejo. She's the college and career counselor over at San Clemente High School. She also works at Capistrano Valley High School. And then B. Nguyen is the college and career counselor at Aliso Niguel High School. So we are kind of spread around throughout the different high schools in the district. Tonight's presentation is all about SAT and ACT testing. You'll learn a little bit about whether or not you should be taking these exams, how to prepare, which one to take, the differences between the two. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our guest speaker for this evening. His name is Joe Tuhig, and he is an academic advisor with Revolution Prep. So he will be presenting the information tonight in tonight's presentation. Before you get started, Joe, one last thing I wanted to mention was that if you all have questions, you're unable to voice your questions out loud, but you can submit any questions that you have in the Q&A box. So you can submit questions through there, and then we will save the end of the presentation to answer any questions that you have. Thank you. And Joe, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, I'm Joe with Revolution Prep. I'm the academic advisor for Capital Valley Schools for Revolution Prep. There's a QR code on the screen. I'll put it up again at the end. If you'd like to get a copy of this presentation from tonight, you can scan that. That will put you in contact with Revolution Prep through our marketing department. They will let you know about upcoming webinars and some of our paid services. But if you want a copy of the presentation, you can scan that code and put some information and get that.
Sorry, one more thing I forgot to mention to everyone. This presentation is being recorded as well. So you can also find the recording of tonight's presentation on the Futurology website sometime tomorrow. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no problem. That's great. So who the heck is Revolution Prep? Well, we've been around for about 20 years. We started here in Southern California. We do online tutoring for SAT and ACT and PSAT, just about any kind of standardized test, as well as about 100 different academic topics. And our mission is to transform millions of lives through online instruction. But let's enough about us. Let's get into the meat of what we want to talk about tonight. And that is that the reality is competition's pretty tight for admission into universities. You can see the admissions rates of Harvard, Princeton, Northwestern, UCLA, and NYU in the bar graph at the left. And then the bars on the right show you the increase in applicants from year to year in a 1-year period. The number of applicants went up pretty significantly. The UCLA bar looks small, but they're coming from a really gigantic spot in the first place. That is the most applied to school in the country. Last year, I believe they had over 140,000 applications for about 6,600 seats. So pretty competitive next steps coming up. But there's a lot you can do to really control your own admissions process. Here's what we're going to talk about tonight. Testing really has a new value since COVID. You want to set your own personal goals based on the most competitive school that you plan to apply to. And then there will be probably an array of schools you might be interested in. So decide for yourself what that minimum score is that you'd want to report to each of those schools. And this is an area where the having at least many schools be choice about test optional about whether you submit the scores or not. For most schools at this point, you can decide whether you're going to submit that score or not, but you want to have a strategy for yourself. A less competitive school, you might submit a lower score. A more competitive school, you might only do a higher score just to make yourself look better to them. And then we want you to decide which test to focus on. Very few students prepare for and take both an SAT and ACT. You only need one or the other, and every college in the country says they'll take either one interchangeably. Both of the tests are challenging. They're both learnable. There are some big changes coming to the PSAT and SAT, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then you want to maximize your personal scores by improving your mindset and your study habits. And we can talk about that for a minute. And then if it's appropriate, pick the prep plan that makes sense for you. So number one, testing has a new value since COVID-19. Well, it kind of accelerated the test optional, test flexible, test free kind of schools. There are many more of them than there ever were before. I think any educator would tell you that throughout COVID-19, there's been some learning loss. A lot of standardized testing has become and is becoming more virtual. There have been many articles recently, just in the last month or so, about legacy admissions to many colleges being reconsidered and maybe not being so important. But because the schools are so competitive, even 9th and 10th grade years have become more important in the whole process. There's a huge volume of applicants for especially the more competitive schools, and there seems to be a decreased emphasis on class rank, and a lot of that has to do with COVID. So here are kind of a conglomerate of some selective schools and the number of applicants between 2019, 2020, and 2021, going from roughly 400,000 to over 550,000 just at these 8 schools. Now, these are very competitive schools, but a lot of your students are really have very high flying ambitions and are really looking to apply to maybe some of these very same schools. The number of test optional or test free schools has grown tremendously in the last 4 years, from maybe around 1,000 in 2019 to somewhere in the maybe 1,800 now this year. And you can use that to your advantage. You can only submit scores if it's really going to tell the story you want to tell to that individual school. So how do you set your goals? Well, making sure you know what you want to show a school about yourself is important. So test optional and test flexible schools will accept either an SAT or an ACT. And many schools around the country still require a test. So you want to know what the schools you individually are interested in are going to ask for, and then what score ranges are going to be important. We tell students that if you set your goal as the 75th percentile of students who actually got admitted the previous year, that should put you in a very advantageous place. But then whether you're going to submit scores or not also depends on the competitiveness of the rest of your application. If your GPA is lower, well, the SAT score or ACT score might be a more important part of you being accepted. The SAT and ACT do give another good data point for people who work in admissions office to think about your individual student as an applicant. And then, you know, we know this, and we've been able to prove this over years, that focus prep generates good outcomes. You can do focus prep on your own. There's lots of ways you can do it. You can get into a class, you can use a tutor, you can, you know, use YouTube videos. You know, there's a lot of ways. Khan Academy is a very popular way to help students self-prep. But again, let's talk about what your goals are. You talk to your counselor, talk to your parents, start putting together your school list. Now, if you Google the words admitted student profile and the name of the school that you'd like to attend, it'll typically show you the 25th and 75th percentile of both SAT and ACT scores and GPAs. So you can get a feel for where you fit into that school's admission possibility. And then, you know, if it's going to be a place where you're really honing in on a couple of schools, if possible, if you can visit the colleges that interest you, that's a great way to really get a feel for, is this a place where I really want to spend the next 4 years or so of my life? So again, you want to aim for the 75th percentile. So these numbers represent 75th percentiles for a lot of different schools. Yale is very, very competitive at 1570. In fact, all these schools in this diagram are all incredibly selective schools. But you know, as if you do that admitted student profile research on any schools you're interested, you can see what that number is. So, you know, you want to maximize your strengths to get into that 75th percentile. So say you did a practice test for the SAT and you were 770 out of 800 on the language side and 600 out of 800 in the math side. Well, you don't have a whole lot of room to work here on the language side. Hopefully you'd push that up to near a perfect score, but there's a lot of points to gain on this side of the test. So, you know, think about how you're going to maximize the areas where you're already strong, and then how you're going to use that opportunity to perhaps, like in this case, move from a 600 to a 770 on the math side of the program. So again, now this part's important. The score minimum that you're willing to report per school. Now this is University of Chicago, which is a test optional school, which also allows you to super score, meaning if you took the test 2 times and maybe scored higher in math on one time than you did, and the other time maybe you were higher in, say, reading and science, they would actually allow you to combine those to create a super score. The downside of that is it's not just for you, it's for everybody. So for this student, even though they had pretty high scores, you know, these are their actual scores. A 27 in December, a 31 in February, unfortunately, the school's 75th percentile is a 35 based on students who are going to super score. So this particular student decided, even with that high score, that they were going to test again after taking it in February in either April or June for the ACT, because with a 32, a very good score, that's their super score though. And everybody else who's applying to this particular school gets it as well. So, and then these are some other things that most schools are going to consider, like your GPA, the rigor of your classes. Are you taking AP or honors or advanced classes? What are you doing with extracurricular activities? Are you doing things that demonstrate leadership? And then diversity and supplemental materials can come into play as well. Okay, so which test is going to make more sense for you? Well, you know, unless a college is test free, everybody will accept an ACT or an SAT. There are no easier test dates. The College Board and ACT.org both employ hundreds of psychometricians, and their job is to try to make every administration of the test as even and fair as possible. Typically, they'll have the same number of questions in the same subject areas. So, they're really going to do their best to balance out the test. Most students will score higher the second time they take a test for real. So you should probably plan to take either an SAT officially 2 times. You may do more than that if you don't hit the score you're looking for, but most students will do better the second time through. And then think about it. Are you going to be able to use super scoring because your top few schools are all going to accept it? Wow, then maybe if you get the math score you want the first time in, maybe then you can really just spend all of your time working on the language side of the test before you take your second attempt at the test and then combine those two numbers. But all these tests are learnable. It does take time. It does take effort, but if you're willing to put that in, you can really achieve some great results. So what's the difference between an SAT and an ACT? Okay, so we're talking about the current written SAT, and I'll talk about how that's going to change in a little while. Both tests are about 3 hours long. The ACT does offer an optional essay. The SAT no longer even offers an essay. A max score on an ACT is 36, max on an SAT is 1600. The content covered in the ACT includes a science section, which we don't see on the SAT, and how that affects the values of the different sections is that math is only worth 25% of an ACT, and math is worth 50% of an SAT total score. You can use the calculator through the entire ACT and only for half of the math on the SAT. Math goes from easy to hard on both tests, but only the math section. Everything else on both tests is kind of mixed up. The big issue for most students with the ACT is the time crunch. For instance, you do 60 math questions in 60 minutes. It's really moving. SAT is more of a focus on your critical thinking skills. Spring 2024, so March of next year, there will be a digital version of the SAT and the paper version will no longer be available. We don't have a target date for the ACT to release something similar. And then again, there are multiple times throughout the year you can take either one of these tests. If you're going for ACT, so we've got one next month, then in April, then in June, then July, then September, then October, and then December. SAT has the other dates. The shaded box means that when you take it in one of these dates, you can request and pay for the question and answer service, which gives you all the questions and your answer and the correct answer for everything on the test. So what we want you to do is only prepare for one exam at a time. There's just too much to do. Which test is right for you? Well, if you've already, say you're a junior and you've already taken a PSAT, we have a pretty good idea of how we think you might score on an SAT because they follow the same format, they have the same question types. In fact, if you took an SAT and stripped out about say maybe the 5 or 10% most difficult content on the test, you'd be left with a PSAT. And then if you want to take a practice ACT, then we'd have a really good idea of which way makes more sense for you. Every college in the country uses this. This is called a concordance table. And this is how you can compare an ACT score to an SAT score and then what percentile that puts you in. And again, this chart is used by all the colleges in the whole country. This does not say that everybody should take the ACT. This is just things for you to weigh for your personal choice. If you're strong in math and you like a little slower approach, SAT might be the test for you. If you have a little higher baseline score and you're going to get accommodations, so you'd get extra time, that would be a great reason to take the ACT. If your English language arts are very strong, the ACT can be helpful. And if you don't want to spend so much time doing critical thinking, trying to answer questions, but more things that kind of reflect your high school work, the ACT might be the right test for you. Okay, so number 5, both tests are challenging, but learnable. So let's talk about your prep plan here. So take a practice test of each, then decide which one is the best fit. Sometimes students will just tell me, I don't ever want to have to study for that ACT science again, or that math on the ACT goes way too fast. I'd much rather do the SAT. You'll have your own reasons for it. And we'll use the data too. I mean, if you're 90% on one test and 80% on the other, wow, it's a lot less work to fix the one that's already at 90%. Set your goal score based on your most competitive school, and then select a couple of test dates that make sense for you. If you're going to take 4 AP exams in May, then the May SAT is probably not a great choice for you, because you need to be spending that time working on something else, which is also very important. And then decide, how do you want to prep? And again, there's, you can do it yourself, you can do a class, you can have your own tutor, you can use online videos. So there's lots of different ways to do it. But then put together your plan, consider your long-term goal. University acceptance is one thing, but if you're going to apply to a very competitive major, then the difficulty level just went up again. If you're going to apply to something like pre-med or engineering, those are typically two of the most competitive majors at most schools. You might need an even higher test score or GPA to be accepted into that kind of a program. But start with your SAT and ACT starting scores, and then figure out what your plan is going to be to get there. Think about what those dates are going to be. Because once you've got a plan, there's a lot of unknowns right now, but the more you can plan this out, the more you can lock things in, the lower your stress should be about the whole thing. So the ideal situation would be to finish standardized testing before the beginning of senior year, which typically means, if you could do it, your last test would be either an August SAT or a July ACT. And, these goals should be achievable for you, depending on where you're starting from and how much time you have to put into it. The practice test reports can really help you with planning, because they'll show you where your big areas of opportunity are, can help you lay out, understand your time management challenges with one test or the other. And that's a great way to measure what is your baseline, what's your starting place for either SAT or ACT prep. And then you kind of get an idea, what is the scope of this whole project? How much work is there really to do here? So both tests, SAT and ACT, are cumulative, and they cover years of learned concepts, typically back to about 7th grade. So it's 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, and perhaps even for some students, 11th grade, kind of depending on where you are in math. But math is going to include algebra, trig, geometry, and word problems. In reading, it's reading speed. It's understanding main ideas. It's understanding words in context and being able to compare multiple texts. If you're going to write the essay for the ACT, that essay structure is important. But even if you're just doing the writing section of the test, either the SAT or ACT, which is, you don't write anything, it's still a multiple choice test, but you have to be able to sort of deconstruct essay structure and make choices about grammar and make choices about punctuation and the rhetoric that's used there. And then if you're doing science on the ACT, being able to pull information out of charts and graphs as it's used in scientific information, and then being able to use that end text to draw conclusions about experiments. All these skills will be drawn on in these standardized tests. So let's talk about a time SAT testing plan, a timeline for a rising junior. So the end of sophomore year. So at that point, it'd be great to determine your test dates, like when are you planning to take a test, and then create your study plan and determine your method. Then you could maybe in the middle of summer, maybe start some prep for an SAT or ACT, and then, give yourself some goals on what content are you trying to master and how far, what's your target while we're still in summer to raise that score. During August to September, maybe really focus prep on the weak, high yield content areas, giving yourself some strategies for accuracy and mastery. Maybe October, November might take your first official SAT and then start work on some of those, we call them low yield areas, where you're going to put a lot more effort in to get things right, but it's not going to move your score tremendously like some of the high yield areas are. And then maybe December through February, maybe your second official SAT and working on your time management skills. And then possibly maybe your last official SAT is in March. But if you can't get it done by then maybe it's June. Maybe your SAT isn't complete until August of your senior year. Now you can take it even beyond that for many schools. Most schools will still accept a senior year October SAT, but it's the earlier you can get this stuff done, the better, because it all comes down to how much time and how much effort you can afford to put into this. So another thing is, these are long tests. Right now, the SAT and ACT are both about 3 hours long. And research says that over 75% of teenagers don't get enough sleep. And fatigue makes learning more difficult. And it also makes it more challenging to recall information on test day. And it's a great way to lose focus and motivation during the test. So staying up the night before one of these tests, cramming, is a really bad idea. And trying to get onto a more normal sleep schedule should make you just a more effective student in all the stuff you're doing in school. The tests are really long. 3 hours is longer than anything you do in school, but you can build that mental endurance. Kind of think about it like being an athlete, getting ready for game day. By taking a few practice tests, then it's not so unbearable on test day because you've already done this multiple times. Taking full length practice tests is a great way to build that mental endurance. Logic games for extended periods, use your homework for school to mimic exam timing, and also help you build that endurance. And I think it's important that if you're going to do practice tests, you use official expired tests, tests that College Board or ACT has actually created themselves, and that's something that some other entity has created for you. Okay, so I said big changes were coming to the SAT, and they are. So ACT has said they plan to develop a digital test. We don't have any dates, don't have any kind of release on that, but the digital PSAT and SAT are on their way. So in October of this year's sophomores will be taking a digital PSAT. And then for that, probably that same group of students, the first release of the digital SAT will be in spring of 24, so in about 14 months. And when they make the cutoff from the written test to the digital test, the written test will not be available anymore. These tests are already being piloted by students in different places around the country. Why did they want to do this? Well, they're able to have a very effective test, which is shorter. It's going to be closer to 2 hours than 3 hours. You can get the scores back much more quickly. They can be much more flexible with test dates, and they can have kind of an adaptive nature in the test as well. So what do we expect to have happen with the digital SAT? It'll be delivered either at your school or in a test center. You won't be able to take this test from home. You'll be in a testing environment. It'll still be on the 1600 point scale. You'll be able to access it with a laptop or a tablet. It's going to be around 2 hours long. So the reading passages will be shorter. The scoring will be way faster. There's a built-in calculator for all the math. There will be multiple versions, even within the same school on the same day, which means there will also be more test dates, and there will be a countdown timer available right on your screen the whole time. So their thought was that this creates a shorter but still very effective test, and colleges seem to be ready to embrace this. Now, what does that calendar look like again? Okay, so spring of 2023, uh, nothing huge changes. When we get to fall of 23, now we're into the PSAT being a digital test, but the US SAT is still a written test. But by spring of 24, so that's actually closer to 13 months from now than 14, everything will be digital. So that means for rising sophomores and younger, everything is going to be digital for them. Okay, so maximizing your score by improving your mindset and your study habits. At Revolution Prep, we are huge believers in growth mindset, which basically says I can learn anything I want to. And when I'm frustrated, I persevere. And I really like challenging myself. And you know what? When I fail, I learn from that. And I want you to tell me that I try hard. And if you succeed, I'm inspired, and my effort and attitude determine everything. A fixed mindset is different in many ways. Somebody with a fixed mindset believes they're either good at something or they're not. And when they get frustrated with something, they give up. They don't really like to be challenged. And when they fail, it tells them they're no good. They want someone to tell them they're smart. And if you succeed, they feel threatened. And then my abilities are what determine everything. So you can see the big differences here. We really believe in the growth mindset, and that really opens you to be able to learn all kinds of things and not put limits on yourself. Okay, now the transcript is going to be the #1 factor in admission. What does that mean? Well, I always tell students, if it's a choice between doing some work that's going to raise your GPA or is going to raise your SAT score, do the thing that's going to raise your GPA first, because that's the first 50% at every college in the country. So here's some additional tips. So if you're a freshman right now and you're listening to this, don't worry about the admissions test right now. This year, focus on your grades and getting involved in some extracurricular activities. If you're a sophomore this year, yeah, you could probably take a PSAT, maybe even a practice test this year, but your primary focus is your grades. Now, if you're a junior, a lot of stuff's going on. You've already, by this time in the year, you've already taken the PSAT when it was offered back in October, and now it's time to start really putting that plan in place. Which test you're going after? Let's get started on getting ready for the test, and let's get a couple of dates booked. Now, if you're a senior, avoid thinking you've got it all in the bag, because even as a senior, you can kind of blow it at that point. If your grades go down significantly enough, you could have an admission from a college revoked. So let's not do that. In senior year, you've got a ton to do with researching and applying to schools, researching and applying to scholarships, getting letters of recommendation, writing your own essays, putting this whole kind of packaging of yourself ready to go so that colleges look at you as a great candidate for their school. So academic support, executive function, or exam prep, if you want help, we can help you with any of that stuff. We do private tutoring, group test prep, and then we have homework help, or what we now call Revolution Now, where you can do live video or in a group, or live chat tutoring with a tutor on any homework topic. Our tutors are mentors. They're really selectively hired, and they're subject matter experts. I'm Joe. I am your academic advisor for Revolution Prep. If you want to talk to me, here's my number. Here is my email address. And I think we're ready to open it up to questions. And again, if you want to get a copy of the presentation you just saw, if you scan this, we will email that to you. And I think we want to come back on screen here and start going through some of the questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all of that wonderful information, Joe. So someone said that when they tried scanning the QR code, it says not found.
Oh, no.
I'm not sure if that needs to get updated.
Oh, boy. Well, I'll tell you this. If you send me an email to this email address, I will get a copy of this out to you.
Thank you.
Sure, you bet.
Okay, so the next question is, will all schools require the SAT/ACT for 2024?
Oh, no, all schools don't require it now. So there are many schools that are already test blind or test optional. So certainly not every school.
Awesome, thank you. Can SAT/ACT test be taken while at a 2-year for application for transfer to I believe they meant to write 4-year university?
In most cases, if you're in a JC, a 2-year college, you're going to earn your way into a 4-year school based on the transcript that you're earning at that JC. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, so you typically, if your plan is to go straight to a community college, you would not need to take the SAT or ACT. So typically those exams would mainly be if you're planning on applying to 4-year universities. If you're not sure, then I think a good rule of thumb is to take an exam just in case, as a precautionary measure. But if you know for sure you're going to a community college, you wouldn't need to take those exams to get into college.
Okay, I think that's great.
Next question is, do students with an IEP get extra help, and how do you obtain that?
So if you have, and again, you're more of an expert on this than me, my understanding is that if you have an IEP registered with the counseling department of your school, that you can apply to College Board for extra time on the SAT or to ACT for extra time on their test. And typically they will give you whatever extra time accommodation your school allows you.
Yeah, so there's a process for accommodations, and you can look at those procedures on College Board's website for SAT or ACT.org if you're planning on taking ACT. You do need to request accommodations in advance. There is a process to it. If you need, I would just kind of start with Google searching that, seeing what the steps are. And then if you need further assistance, reach out to your school's college and career futurology counselor, and we can definitely assist you with that as well. The next question is, what is advantageous to take the ACT? Oh, when is it advantageous to take the ACT written portion versus not advantageous?
Are you talking about does this mean the essay?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, well, it used to be that the essay was required for a lot of majors at a lot of schools. So if you know not just what school you want to go to, but what major you're actually hoping to get into, you really want to do a little deeper dive and see if something like the ACT essay could help you. Is it something that if they say they recommend you do it, that means most of the students who get into that program are going to do it. So that means that's something you should definitely be doing yourself. And you can do a little more research than just like the admissions page. You can look a little further into, say you want to be in a particular liberal arts portion of a college. They might recommend that you take the ACT essay. Very few schools are going to require it at this point, but again, most of the students who actually going to be admitted are either going to have done that or found another way to submit some kind of a writing sample.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, what if you just aren't a good test taker? So I guess this person's looking for some advice in terms of not being a good test taker.
Right. Again, taking tests is a skill you can learn. We teach a lot of students every year how to become better test takers. For some students, it's trying to rush through a test. For some students, they're not really great at reading the question thoroughly and knowing what question they're supposed to be answering. Many times it's just kind of a general anxiety around testing. There are techniques you can learn to calm yourself down and focus more and read more closely the actual question, so you at least start off trying to do the right thing. There are a lot of techniques like that that you can learn to become a better test taker. And this test may seem really foreign now, but the difficulty level of it and kind of the structure of it might be very similar to a lot of your college exams. So learning to overcome this kind of a test while you're still in high school is a valuable process as well.
Okay, awesome. The next question is, and we were just talking about this actually before the webinar started, Joe, is are California universities considering SAT scores?
Right now, not at all. Right now, this year, both the UC and the Cal State systems are saying we're going to be test blind. So, but the UCs say if you've taken the SAT and we admit you without knowing what your SAT score was, afterwards, we're going to want to see your SAT score because we'll still use it for placement. They have thousands of freshmen and they want to make sure they get them in the right math and the right English class for them to be successful in their first year at the school. And they will use data from the SAT or ACT to help them with that process.
Right. So for UCs, they on their website, you can Google it. They are test free until 2025, meaning that they are not requiring test scores for admission purposes. And they're not even test optional. So if you send them your scores, they will not use them for admissions purposes. So in terms of making an admissions decision, they won't utilize your scores for that purpose. But yes, Joe's correct. They can use your scores if you would like them to be considered for placement in certain math and English courses. However, there are other ways that you can be placed in math and English courses if you choose not to take the SAT. So they can use the classes that you're in high school, the grades that you've received. So they have multiple measures that they'll utilize to determine placement. So if you are only applying to UCs, you definitely don't have to take an SAT or an ACT. Cal State universities have not officially released a statement for next school year. However, they also were test free for current year seniors. And we're expecting that they will follow the same trend that the UCs are doing for next school year. So kind of stay tuned for that. The next question is, my child is a junior this year. Will he be taking digital SAT next year?
No, because his applications are going to be due in about 9 months here. So we're already in the countdown for this year's juniors. They're going to be applying in fall of this year, fall of 23. So the test will change in spring of 24, and that's going to be too late for you to use it for admissions.
Okay, the next question is there a list of schools that do not require the SAT or ACT?
Yes, there's a website you can go to, fairtest.org, and it'll give you an updated list of schools that do not require, that are either test free or test optional. They'll give you both options. You know, you can see both kinds of lists there, and then you know, you can decide if those schools match up with what you want for your education. That can definitely be a way to go.
Awesome. Next question is, can I still take the SAT/ACT in college?
Why would you do that? I guess you could, probably at any age, you could create a College Board account and take their test, but I don't think there's a solid use for it once you've started college, because their admissions decisions have already been done at that point. We're not hearing you.
So SAT, yeah, Joe's correct. So SAT and ACT, those are college admission standardized tests. So colleges use those to determine your admission status and to review your college application. So once you're already in college, it wouldn't really make sense for you to take an exam at that point. The next question is, what is the approach for international universities?
Wow, that's a global question. Um, but you know what? That's a place where I'm going to say I'm not qualified to answer that, and you are going to have to do a lot of research on your own. You're going to have to do some Googling. There's got to be something similar to their admission requirements page for any institution of higher learning anywhere in the world, I assume. So that's probably a good starting point. And then if you find a couple of international universities you're very excited about, I would use their contact email and start getting in touch with them and start come up with a list of questions that you want them to answer for you. And they'll be happy to do it.
Yeah, that's a great point. And yeah, pretty much if you have a specific list of international universities that you're interested in, you can just type the name of the university into Google and then type undergraduate admission requirements for California residents. Typically, they will have a list of admission requirements depending on what state you live in, what country you live in. So it just will require some extra legwork, but you're definitely welcome to schedule an appointment with your college and career counselor at your high school, and they can assist you with that process. I've typically seen in the past that international universities heavily depend on AP exam scores. So that's been a common trend, but they may require SAT, ACT, they may be test optional, so it will really be dependent upon the university. The next question is, if we had to choose between taking the ACT or SAT, which do you recommend the most?
That is such an individual question. Does your student like science? Are they strong in science? Are they stronger in science than they are in math? If they're stronger in science than math, then the ACT might be a great choice for that student. If they like working out puzzles, doing some creative thinking, trying to figure out like, what does this question really mean? The SAT might be a better fit for that student. Again, the ACT is going to move very fast. The major challenge there is the time crunch. The SAT is more having to kind of figure out what the question is after you read it. And the SAT gives you more time to do that. They give you about 45% more time per question, just because they know you're going to have to figure that stuff out before you can even start really answering the question. Also, the SAT does have, in the math section, does have some questions that are not multiple choice. So you have to actually bubble in a number, like 3.14 might be your answer, and you have to bubble that in, and you don't see that at all in the ACT.
Okay, the next question is, should you do test prep for PSAT? Do those scores matter or just a gauge to start from?
The PSAT, when you take it as a junior in October of your junior year, is also the National Merit Scholarship qualifying test. So for exceptional students, that can be a road to some scholarship money. It's very, very competitive. A very tiny number of students actually score so high that they actually essentially get a check from the test. But it is also used as kind of a gateway for many privately funded scholarships, and it might be worth spending some time really preparing for that test to get yourself into that range, because it might lead to more scholarship opportunities for you.
Thank you. Okay, next question. If I'm applying to a UC school and they are not considering SAT scores, why should I still take the SAT?
If you're only going to apply to UC schools, you absolutely don't have to take the SAT or ACT, which means spend a lot of time doing your homework. Your GPA needs to be super high. Your every other factor needs to be nearly flawless. The UCs are incredibly competitive. They want to see a really clean transcript since they're not looking at the SAT. And if you go, there's a page that'll give you all the different criteria that the UC system looks at on each student. And some of the things on that list might surprise you. And I think it's 16 items long. So Google it and take a look at other things your student might work on. But number one is your transcript. Get as high a grades as you can in every class, every year. If it's appropriate, take AP classes, take that AP exam, and then get as high a score as possible on those AP tests as well.
The next question is, are the SAT and ACT equally prestigious?
Every school, every college in the country insists they use that same concordance table that I showed earlier, and that as long as you hit whatever that number is, they are going to accept either test. So in terms of acceptance, they're the same. The SAT typically has more test takers per year, but I'm not sure that necessarily means it's more or less prestigious, just that, more students nationally take the SAT than the ACT.
Okay. Next question. Would you recommend traditional classes to improve the GPA or honors/AP classes, understanding it might lower the GPA, but are clearly more difficult classes?
Ooh, that's where I love to throw it right back to the counselor. But that is, again, a personal choice. How much time and effort do you have to put into this? Are you going to take multiple APs and really be stretched so thin that, you could crash your whole GPA in that one semester? Well, don't overload it. And this is such a terrible answer, because I think what the colleges want to see is the student who gets A's and 4s and 5s on the AP exam. And that's not every student. That's not just practical, because there's such a time commitment in those classes. So talk to your counselor before signing up for a schedule like that. And, be realistic in how much time and effort you're willing to put into each one of these classes to maintain your GPA, and whether the AP is going to overload your academic card. Do you have any comments?
Yeah, I think that I agree with what you said. I always let students know, like, do what works for you. Try to take on what you feel comfortable taking on. When I was in high school, I was only able to take on one honors class a year. I wasn't able to dedicate more time than that, because that's just what worked for me. Someone else might be able to take on 3 honors and AP classes each school year and do exceptionally well, and that's what works for them. Try not to think of it as like, what do the colleges want to see? Try to just like compete within yourself and do what you feel like you can handle. Talk to your academic school counselor about recommendation for leveling up into honors and AP classes. Also talk to your current teachers and ask them what their opinion is in terms of you leveling up into an honors or an AP class next school year. They've seen your schoolwork. They have seen how you have performed in the classroom. They can provide you with insight in terms of how they feel like you'll be able to handle leveling up into an honors and AP class. And then in terms of getting an A in a standard college level A through G class versus getting a B in a honors or AP class, really, like, it's dependent upon the college. I feel like some colleges, they do really, appreciate when students are able to challenge themselves and take rigorous courses such as honors and AP classes. And even if that means you get a B in an honors or an AP class, you're still challenging yourself, right? You're still putting yourself out there. You did something brave by taking a rigorous course, and a B is still a good grade. I think sometimes we tend to get hard on ourselves and we want to get straight A's in every single class, but a B in a college level class still looks great. So it's very dependent, and you should always do what works best for you. The next question is, in your professional opinion, even if a school does not require the SAT or ACT, is there some truth that when students are being compared for admissions that they would potentially choose the student who took the SAT or ACT?
If we're talking about a test optional school, the reality has been that students who submit an SAT or ACT score, that either reflects or perhaps enhances. I mean, say your GPA is a 3.8 and you have a SAT or ACT score, which is in the 96, 97 percentile. In most cases, students who do both of those things are going to be admitted at a much higher rate than students who do not submit a test score. The people who are making admissions decisions in general are looking for more data points on your student, not less. So if it's going to enhance your transcript, then yes, I think you absolutely want to submit an SAT or ACT.
Okay, the next one is, hi, I'm a sophomore who hasn't yet taken a PSAT / any practice test. Will I be able to take a PSAT in the first semester of my junior year? And what path in terms of timing do you recommend if I choose to take the SAT?
The slide that we talked about a little earlier. So, partly it's based on usually what math class you're in by junior year. Have you seen all the math that's going to be on the test in school already? You're going to perform much better if it's something you've already covered. The math on either an SAT or ACT typically goes up to trigonometry, maybe complex numbers, and there's like one or two of those questions. So maybe 3D geometry. So those are typically the most complex math questions on a test. And if you've seen that kind of work in your math class, then yes, you're ready to put whatever time and effort you're willing to put into it and schedule and take a test. But I always recommend taking at least a practice test of whatever test you're going to take, probably before you even start prepping for it, just to get an idea, like, what is the target here? What am I really going to try and do? And where am I today? And if you're starting at 700, that's very different than starting at 1200. If you think the schools you're going to apply to, you're going to need something above a 1450.
Okay, the next question is, if you take the SAT / ACT multiple times, do the schools see all your scores or just your highest?
Boy, that's again a per school kind of decision. Some schools only want to see where you cross the line, where you hit the mark, or maybe two test scores where this math score and this language score together put you above the mark. Many schools just want to see that. Some schools are going to want to see everything. So I can't just give you a blanket answer to that. Again, that kind of depends on where you're actually going to apply.
Okay, the next question is, if you have over a 4.0 GPA and you score badly on the SAT or ACT, will it affect you as much?
Well, that's, I think, where the test optional world can work in your favor. If your SAT is going to be significantly lower than your GPA shows you to be the caliber of student you show to be, and you don't have time to take the test again and improve that score, then maybe, and that's again where I was saying, look at target scores you're willing to submit on a per school basis. So if I'm going to apply to this moderately competitive school, I would submit a 1300. But at this more competitive school, unless I hit a 1450, they're going to think I didn't take the SAT. I'm not going to submit anything. So that in that way, the test optional world really favors the student.
Okay. Do UC schools look at your unweighted and weighted GPA? So I can answer that one. UC schools will look at your weighted 10 through 12 GPA, as will Cal State universities. So that's the GPA that they'll use for admission purposes. The next question is it worth taking the SAT or ACT if the schools I want to go to are test optional or test blind?
I would say yes. Number one, it may have you be better prepared when you get to college. And again, test optional schools doesn't mean they don't want to see your SAT score. It means you can apply there without it. So if you can get an SAT score that again either reflects or enhances the quality of your transcript, absolutely submit that. It can only help you at that point.
Okay. So the class of 2025 won't need to submit their SAT scores, question mark. So again, that's specific to UCs. They are test free until 2025. But private and out-of-state schools, a lot of them are still test optional. Some universities, some private and out-of-state universities have gone back to the old model of requiring test scores. So it's very dependent upon universities. The 2025 remark that we had made earlier was specific to UC campuses only. Again, we feel like the Cal States will most likely follow suit, but they haven't come out with an official statement yet. So stay tuned for that. And then for merit scholarships, most require an SAT or ACT. Will this change for fall 2024 enrollment?
That's such a wide open question because it may come down to that money has to come from somewhere. Who's funding this scholarship? If it's privately funded, actually, even if it's publicly funded, they can put whatever rules around applying for their scholarship that they want to. So if it's something that in the past you've needed it for, I would assume in the future it's going to help you get it.
Okay. It sounds like it's only necessary to take the SAT or ACT if you are going to a private school in California. Am I correct?
And that means you will not look at any schools outside California, then I think that's essentially correct.
So wait, let me reread that question. It sounds
Okay.
like it's only necessary to take the SAT or ACT if you are going to a private school in California. So some out-of-state schools outside of California are test optional as well. So it still could help you in that sense if you're applying to schools outside of California. It's not only going to be beneficial for private schools in California. So out-of-state schools, it could still be beneficial. Again, a lot of schools are test optional. If you do well on the exam, then it could potentially help your application for certain universities. And then, okay, yeah. Do you need to apply and be accepted to transfer from a community college or JC and or take an SAT/ACT test?
Maybe this is better for you to answer.
Okay, let me reread that. So do you need to apply and be accepted to transfer from a community college or JC? Need to apply and be accepted to transfer. Yeah, so you still do have to, if you're planning on starting out at a community college, you still will have to be accepted to a four-year university. The nice thing about community college, there's a lot of great benefits. It's free right now if you're eligible to apply for financial aid. There's some terms and conditions for the Promise. It's called the Promise program. You have to attend community college full-time each semester, except for summer, depending on what community college you're looking at. But yes, you still have to apply to a four-year university when you're ready to transfer, and you still have to get accepted. If your goal is to transfer to a UC or a Cal State specifically, it's typically a little bit easier to get in to a Cal State or a UC coming from community college. And then community colleges also have something called the TAG program, which stands for Transfer Admission Guarantee, meaning if you follow the requirements under the program requirements, then you are guaranteed admission into that specific UC campus that you sign an agreement with. It's not binding, meaning if you change your mind, you don't have to go to that campus, but it's a great way for students to have reassurance that, they are guaranteed admission somewhere. And typically the TAG requirements are, again, less rigorous coming from community college versus high school. So if community college is where you plan to start, you would meet with a community college counselor, let them know that you're interested in pursuing a TAG agreement with one of the 6 UC campuses that they have an agreement with. And then you basically just follow a set of requirements. So you have to maintain a certain GPA, take certain classes. But yeah, you still do have to get accepted from community college. Okay, the next question, do you have to report all AP test scores? if a student takes an AP class but does not take the AP test, does that hinder acceptance to the college?
I'm going to say that I think a great AP score, typically 3 means you can get credit, 4 or 5 is showing exceptional work on that exam. And if you don't take so that's obviously a 4 or 5 is really going to help your admittance opportunities. And a 3 is going to be like the cheapest college credit you ever got, because you're actually going to get college credit for just taking that class and getting at least a 3 on the test. If you don't take the test, there's no opportunity to gain college credits, and it'll just be factored into your GPA. So you don't get the full benefit, I think, of all the work you're doing to maintain your grade in that AP class if you don't take the AP exam.
Yeah.
You agree?
Yeah, I would add to that and just say that, so when you take the SAT, there's an option in your College Board account. It's called like score choice or something like that, where you can choose which scores you want to send to colleges. And so you can actually go in and select maybe just one specific score that you want to share with a college. AP scores, all of them, I believe, get sent to your colleges at the end of the school year. So wherever you end up going, just by sending one AP score, the report will send everything all together. So if you take an AP test and you don't get a 3, say you get a 1 or a 2, colleges have recommended to us counselors that it is still helpful for students to report their AP test scores on their application. One, because they're going to receive the scores at the end of the year anyways, and it's best to just be honest. Honesty is the best policy. But then in addition to that, you're still showing the colleges that you put yourself out there and that you took the AP exam. You're letting them know that you challenged yourself, you tried your best. And there's many reasons that students don't end up, doing as well on a test as they had hoped. And if you're applying to a school like a UC or a private university, typically there's a space on your application where you can provide any type of explanation for discrepancies. So say you took an AP test and you received a score of a 2, that's not a passing score. You can explain to them, like maybe you had, a really stressful night the night before. Maybe you were in a football game, you're a football player and you hurt yourself. And the next morning you just you didn't feel very well. There's many reasons as to why students don't end up scoring how they, wanted to. So when in doubt, I would just report it. And then the next question is there another time to take PSAT if you missed it in October for a current junior?
I don't believe you guys have any kind of a makeup date for that, do you?
No.
Yeah.
No, but there are practice SAT exams that you can take. Revolution Prep offers a practice SAT and a mock ACT as well. That's every Saturday, pretty much, right, Joe?
That's right. Nearly every Saturday you could sign up for one of those.
Every Saturday. So they have, and they're free, which is awesome. So you can take a practice SAT. And then Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys schedule an appointment with students after the fact, right? Like a one-on-one.
Absolutely. So just because you guys are in the Capital Valley schools, you're entitled to a free 25-minute review of the results of your test, and we can talk about areas of opportunity for you and kind of tie. Sometimes that data will also give you a reason to go back and review some of the things from previous school years, because next year you're going into a really hard math class, and the test might say, some of the stuff you're really going to need to know for this next math class is not very solid yet. So let's go review that as well. So it can be helpful both towards an actual test and kind of filling some of the gaps in a student's transcript as well.
Next question. You mentioned that the UCs do not require SAT, ACT until 2025. My child is graduating in June 2025. Does that mean a test score is not needed? Sorry, I'm not certain of the timing.
My understanding is that what they're saying is that students who are applying in fall of 25, so that would mean graduating in 2026. So I think that does mean they will not be considered for your students here.
Okay, and then if the PSAT score is low, under 1,000, is it still worth to prep the SAT or ACT? No real SAT test yet. The GPA in junior half year is 3.8.
So you had what you consider a lower PSAT score, and the question is whether you should prepare for an SAT.
Yeah, like their PSAT score, they're saying it's low, it's under 1,000. Is it still worth it to prepare? I guess to take maybe like practice tests for SAT or ACT?
Yes, I'm going to say yes. I think it's worth it because we have students make gigantic gains over a period of time. If it's something that's important to them and they want to put the time and effort into it. And, your starting point is whatever it is. What do you think your target needs to be, and how bad do you want to hit that target, and how much time and how much effort are you willing to put into this? Almost everything on the test by the time you're a junior is something you've already done in either high school or middle school. So can you learn it? Yeah, you can learn it. It's just how badly do you want to, and how much time and effort are you willing to put into it?
Okay, thank you. How many weeks are the SAT prep classes that you guys offer, Joe?
So we offer a couple of different versions. The most popular one is 24 hours long in a group. It's a max of 8 students. It meets 12 times for 2 hours each. That's the 24 hours. They are offered both in 1 time a week and 2 time a week classes. So that class would be either 6 weeks or 12 weeks long, depending on whether you choose the once a week or twice a week option.
Okay, and then are some schools starting to only take a non-weighted GPA? Is this being considered for Cal State schools?
I have no idea what Cal State schools are considering.
Yeah, so Cal States and UCs, as far as I know, have always gone about your GPA calculation looking at the weighted GPA. So it's weighted 10 through 12. And then in terms of private and out-of-state schools, since they're not on one individual like system, like how the Cal States and UCs are, it's difficult to say what they all do in terms of GPA. Some will look at your weighted GPA, some will look at your non-weighted GPA, some will look at grades 9 through 12, some will look at 10 through 12. Some take into consideration your classes like health and PE and even your teaching assistant class. Some colleges won't. But in terms of Cal States, they are looking at weighted 10 through 12. And then the next question is how soon, if you are a current sophomore and plan to take the SAT twice next year, it seems like you would be taking the first one on paper and then the one at the end of the school year or summer on the computer. Is that advised?
Well, you might consider doing that just because we know what's going to happen with the written tests, and those written tests are going to be offered all the way through December of this year. So all of fall of your junior year. Might be worth it to take one of those because you have a really solid idea of what exactly that test is going to look like and how it's going to feel to take it and do it on paper. A year from March will be the new digital test. We're going to have a digital test available for students to try out as soon as next month. It's not like you couldn't preview that, but we've never seen anyone take one and get an official score from it. So how is it going to be scored exactly? Is it going to feel fair to students? I assume it will, but we haven't seen that happen yet. So if you were to prepare in time, there might be a strategy to taking the written test once and then, perhaps the digital test maybe once or twice.
Awesome. Those were all of our questions. Thank you so much. We answered a total of 40 questions, so that was a lot.
Did we really? Wow.
Thank you so much, Joe, for being here.
Oh, you bet.
And you did such a great job. I hope that was helpful, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us. Again, this presentation has been recorded and it will be posted on our Futureology website, hopefully sometime by tomorrow. If you haven't already scheduled an appointment with your college and career counselor at your high school, you can do that online at the Futureology website, or you can stop by the College and Career Center at your high school and talk to us in person. Thank you so much again. Have a good night.